Ixandersker. I moved into the forest to disappear. Not because I was running from anything, but because I was tired of people. The noise, the obligations, the empty conversations. I sold everything I had, the apartment, the car, even my phone, and used the money to buy a piece of land deep in the northern forests of Washington state. Dense, quiet, and utterly isolated, just what I needed. I built a small cabin by hand, nothing fancy, just enough to keep the rain out and the fire in. I hauled in supplies once a month, canned food, propane, basic tools. There was no electricity, no internet, and no contact with the outside world. Just me and the forest. For the first 3 months it was perfect. I chopped wood, read old books by lantern light, and slept like I hadn't in years. The silence wasn't empty, it was alive. The wind through the pines, the call of owls at night, the distant rustling of deer moving through the brush. But then, something changed. It started small. On the 87th day, I woke up to find my firewood pile had been neatly restacked. Not just moved, rearranged. Like someone had come in the night and made it symmetrical, perfectly balanced. I figured maybe I'd done it myself and forgotten. Or maybe the pile had just shifted in the wind. I laughed it off. 3 days later, I found footprints in the snow outside my cabin. Bare feet. Human, but not right. The toes were too long, the stride too wide, and they circled the cabin twice before disappearing into the woods. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I set up makeshift traps around the perimeter. Nothing deadly, just some tin cans strung on wire, tied to tree branches. Enough to wake me if something, or someone, got too close. I didn't want to believe someone was out there. Maybe I was just going stir-crazy. Isolation can do that. But still, I kept my hatchet close. Nothing happened for a week. Then, on the 8th night, I heard breathing. Not mine. It was just outside the wall, slow, wet, like someone with a cold was standing inches from the wooden boards, exhaling heavily. I held my breath, not daring to move. Then something brushed the window. Just a whisper of movement, but enough to rattle the tin can alarm. It rang once, then went silent. I waited until dawn before going outside. There were no footprints, no signs of disturbance. But the can was hanging by a single thread, like it had been gently untied, and in the snow beneath it. A perfect circle, carved into the ground, burned into the frost. I decided to hike to the old ranger station, about 9 miles west. It had been abandoned for years, but there was an emergency radio. Maybe it still worked. Maybe I could reach someone. Maybe this had gone far enough. The hike took me all day. The woods were unusually quiet. No birds, no squirrels, even the wind seemed to hush itself. When I reached the station, I found the front door ajar. A thick layer of dust covered everything undisturbed, except for the chair in the corner, which was turned to face the wall. And the radio, smashed. The wires inside twisted into a shape I still don't have words for. It was a kind of spiral, but wrong, like it hurt to look at. I turned and left, my stomach in knots. When I got back to my cabin, the door was open. Not broken, just open. Inside, everything looked normal, except for the mirror above my bed. It was cracked down the center, and written in the frost on the glass were 5 words. Spaced of spiral. He knows you see him. Liam Porus is ill. That night, I boarded the windows and kept the fire burning high. Every crackle of the wood made me flinch. Every shadow became a shape. I kept my hatchet across my chest as I sat in the corner, knees pulled up, eyes fixed on the door. Then, around 3:30 a.m., I heard it again. Breathing. But this time it wasn't outside. It was coming from the attic. The problem is, my cabin doesn't have an attic. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The breathing from the attic that didn't exist, had continued for nearly 5 minutes. Slow, heavy, wet. Like something massive, something diseased, crouched in the darkness above my ceiling, watching me. When the sound finally stopped, I waited. An hour. Then another. At dawn, I finally forced myself to stand. My legs shook, my hands were numb. I opened the front door and let the cold morning air hit my face, just to prove to myself the world was still real. I stepped outside and froze. There were handprints on the cabin walls, hundreds of them. Small, pale, each one pressed perfectly into the frost-covered logs. They circled the entire building, like a crowd had gathered in the night and just watched. I walked the perimeter, stunned. There were no footprints, no drag marks, just the handprints. And above the doorframe, one word had been etched into the wood with what looked like a fingernail. Stay. I didn't. By noon, I had packed a backpack with the essentials: food, water, the hatchet, and my journal. And I headed west, deeper into the forest. I knew it was a risk. I had no phone, no GPS. But I couldn't stay another night. I walked for hours. The forest grew denser, darker. The trees pressed in around me. Branches scraped my coat, snagged my pack. The sun was setting, but I didn't stop. I pushed forward until my legs screamed. Then I saw it. A cabin. Not mine. Older. Rotting. Almost sunken into the earth, as if the forest itself had been trying to swallow it. No smoke, no lights, no sound. I approached slowly, axe in hand. The door hung open crookedly, like it had been yanked halfway off its hinges. The windows were broken. Moss and vines had claimed most of the structure. Still, it looked lived in. Inside, it smelled of mold and old blood. I covered my mouth with my sleeve and stepped carefully over the threshold. There were bones. Animal bones, I told myself. Scattered across the floor, but something about them, the shape, the size. In the center of the room was a circle drawn in ash. In the middle of the circle, a mirror. I stepped closer, heart hammering. The mirror was old, cracked, the frame warped, but as I looked into it, I didn't see myself. I saw my cabin, my bed, my chair, my boarded-up windows, and something moving inside. A figure, tall, thin, moving toward the door, toward me. I stumbled backward, knocking the mirror over. It shattered, the glass splintering across the floor. And in the corner of the room, something began to crawl out of the shadows. I didn't look back. I ran. After I ran until my legs gave out. Collapsed in a dry ravine, I lay there gasping, staring up at the darkening sky. My body ached, my hands were bleeding, but I was alive. I made camp that night, without a fire. No light, no warmth. Just the cold and the sounds of the forest, which had gone quiet again. I clutched the axe in both hands and tried to stay awake, but at some point I must have drifted off, and I dreamed. Or maybe I didn't. In the dream, I was standing outside my cabin again, but the forest was wrong. The trees were too tall, their branches twisted like claws. The moon pulsed in the sky like a heartbeat. And then I saw him. A man, or something like one. He stood at the edge of the trees, naked, skin stretched tightly over his bones. His eyes were black voids. His mouth was too wide, and he was holding my journal. He opened it and began to read, in my voice, word for word, everything I'd written since I arrived. I screamed, I charged at him. And he vanished. I woke up sweating, heart pounding, with the taste of earth in my mouth. The journal was gone from my pack. I the convinded, waiting my packs. I the scream hand. The journal was on tight to the back and the sewn. The man is through the lan. The next morning, I followed a stream downhill. I needed to find civilization, a road, anything. After several hours, I spotted something through the trees, a fence. Rusted, half collapsed, but definitely man-made. I pushed through the underbrush and found myself standing at the edge of something. A compound. Barbed wire, concrete walls, signs faded by time and weather. One still barely readable. U.S. Forest Service, Black Hollow Research Outpost, restricted access. My stomach dropped. I had heard rumors about Black Hollow. Old government experiments, abandoned decades ago, not on any map. But it was real. And the gate was open. I stepped inside. The buildings were collapsing. Vines and moss clung to every surface. Broken glass crunched beneath my boots. It was like walking through a ghost town. Inside the main structure, I found file cabinets, rotten, empty. Scattered papers with cryptic symbols. Diagrams of trees, of brains, of eyes. On the wall was a map of the forest. My cabin was on it, circled in red. Below it, scribbled in marker, "Do not let him cross." I turned, and there he was, just for a second, reflected in a broken window. That pale man, hollow-eyed, grinning, watching me. I ran again, out of the compound, back into the woods. But now I was disoriented. I didn't know which direction I'd come from. The trees all looked the same. And then I heard a voice, not in my ears, in my head. "Come home," it repeated, over and over, soft, calm, familiar. It was my voice. And I realized something that made my blood turn to ice. It wasn't trying to find me. It was calling me back. I was the one who left. I was the one who broke the rule. I was the one who was never supposed to leave the forest. I ran until I couldn't feel my legs. Branches slapped at my face. Thorns clawed at my arms, but I didn't stop, not until my body collapsed under me and I hit the ground, choking on breath and panic. The forest around me was darker now, not just the time of day, but deeper, thicker, like the trees had grown overnight, like they were watching me. The air buzzed with electricity, or maybe madness. I wasn't sure anymore. I curled beneath the thick roots of a twisted pine and tried to stay awake. But exhaustion finally pulled me under, and in my dream I saw the cabin again. It was on fire. Flames curled up the sides, devouring the logs, licking the windows, but no smoke rose. And inside, through the glowing inferno, I could see him, the pale man, sitting at my table, reading my journal out loud. And behind him, others began to appear. Dozens of them, children, elderly, some missing faces, others with hollow eyes like his. They stood silently in the fire, listening to my words. Then he turned to me and smiled, mouthing something. "Finish it." I woke up screaming. I didn't know how many days had passed. I had no sense of time anymore. I drank from streams, ate berries I hoped weren't poisonous. Every night I saw things in the dark, glowing eyes, shadows that didn't move like animals. I should have died from exposure or hunger, but I didn't. Something was keeping me alive. Something wanted me here. On what I assumed was the 6th or 7th day, I stumbled across another path. Narrow but clearly man-made. Overgrown but worn. I followed it. It led me to a stone wall. Ancient, cracked, covered in moss and ivy. A gate stood open. Beyond it, another building. This one, pristine. Too pristine. Polished wood, fresh glass, smoke rising gently from a chimney. A lantern glowed by the front door. I should have turned around. Instead, I knocked. The door opened on its own. Inside, it was warm, clean. A fire crackled in the hearth. Books lined the walls. A kettle whistled softly in the kitchen. "Hello?" I called out. No answer. On the table, a meal was waiting: stew, bread, hot tea. My stomach twisted in hunger, but I didn't dare touch it. And then I saw it, my journal. Sitting beside the plate, I picked it up. Pages had been added, pages I never wrote, dozens of them, in my handwriting, detailing everything that happened since I entered the forest, including things I hadn't told anyone, things I hadn't even realized I remembered. And at the very end, a sentence in red ink: "There is only one way out." I dropped the journal and turned for the door, but the door was gone. In its place was a blank wall. No windows, no chimney. The fire had gone out, the food had rotted, the air grew thick with the smell of decay. And then I heard the footsteps upstairs, slow, measured, coming down, step by step. The house trembled with each impact, the sound deep and wet, like flesh slapping stone. I ran to the back of the room, trying to find anything, a weapon, another exit, something. The steps reached the bottom stair. I didn't look. I didn't have to. I could feel him, standing behind me, breathing. His voice was soft, kind. "Sit." I froze. "Write." A chair scraped the floor behind me. Against every instinct, I sat. A pen and paper were already on the desk. My hand moved without my will. I began to write. I don't know how long I wrote. Hours, days. I wrote about the forest, about the compound, the man, the mirror, the dreams, the voices, the pain, the fear. I wrote and wrote until my fingers bled. Every time I stopped, the voice would whisper, "Keep going." Every time I finished a page, it vanished, until finally the voice said, "You've earned it." And the wall opened. Bright light poured in, too bright, blinding. I stepped outside, and I was back, at the edge of the forest, the same dirt road where my journey had begun. Civilization lay just down the hill, but it didn't feel like home anymore. I hitchhiked into town, got a motel, ate real food, washed the blood and dirt off my skin. But I didn't feel clean, not really. Something had followed me. It's been 6 months. I don't sleep much. When I do, I hear the whispers again. Sometimes I wake up with dirt on my feet, pine needles in my bed. My journal keeps reappearing in places I never leave it. And the worst part? I keep writing. I don't want to, but I do. And now, I think I understand. The forest isn't a place. It's a story. One that grows every time someone tells it. And now that you've heard mine, you're part of it too.